Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar Building Interactive Data Visualizations with D3.js and Ext JS. My name is Mark Guzmano. I am the sales engineer with Sencha. And a few things before we get started. I just want to remind everyone that this webinar will be recorded. If you want to go review it again or send it to your colleagues, feel free to do so. And also, we're going to do about 15 to 20 minutes of discussion and demonstration. At the end of those 15 to 20 minutes, we will do a question and answer session. So as we move forward, if you have any questions, please type them into the question area in the GoToWebinar environment, and we will get to them accordingly. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. Probably the first thing we need to talk about is what D3.js is. And so we'll talk a little bit about that, what you can do with it in your applications that you are developing. We'll then talk about how D3.js is integrated into Ext JS and what that means for you from a simplicity and ability to use some of the visualizations that you may want to use. We'll look at some of the examples that we have available, mostly in our kitchen sink application, and we'll look at several categories of D3 visualizations: trees, tree maps, a pack structure, and also sunburst structure. We'll then talk a bit about more advanced things you can do beyond the components that are in Ext JS and some of the options available to you. And then I put a few links for additional information on using Ext JS with D3.js, just for reference purposes. So first off, what is D3.js? And I have a link here to the main D3.js page. So D3.js is an external open source JavaScript library that allows you to create what are termed data visualizations. What does that mean? That means you can create different types of user interfaces that describe your data in ways that sometimes charts can't do. So for me, I think of D3.js as a data visualization library, and I almost think of it as like charts plus. The ability to do charts, you can use some of the capabilities of D3.js to create traditional bar charts and line charts, but you can go much farther in describing or visualizing your data. As I said, it's an open source project, so there's a GitHub repo for D3 if you care to take a look at it. But probably the easiest way to understand the possibilities with D3.js is to look at an example gallery of things that customers and people have built using D3.js. And immediately you look at some of these thumbnails and you get an idea. You know, some things look very traditional, like bar charts. You can do scatter charts. You can do overlays on maps. You can create sunbursts. You can do circle packing. So all of these are examples of things you can do with the D3.js library. I just picked one at random, the circle packing one, and you'll notice a few things that kind of call the library out. One, it's very interactive. As I move my mouse, I can select things. What we're looking at here is some sort of hierarchical data. So the size of the circle means something, the colors mean something, where they are relative to other circles could mean something. If I click on one of them, you can see there's a nice animation to get you into the details, and I can click back to get out. I can scroll in, scroll out. So that's the concept. It's figuring out how you want to visualize data you may have in your application in different ways than traditional charts. D3 is a very complicated library. There's a lot that you need to do to create visualizations. there's an endless amount of things you can do, but it is quite difficult to get things going and to learn the D3 way. So what we've done in Ext JS is made a subset of the types of D3 visualizations you might want to use for a business application available and make it very, very simple. So what we've done is we've focused on hierarchical-oriented data visualizations. So you have lists of things, and then you go into sublists, and those can be represented in several ways, as trees, as tree maps. You can have the circle packing approach. You can do sunbursts. You can navigate within those. And as Ext JS components, they're very easy to use. The subset that we've created are very easy to use. So I'm going to go into an initial example just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about. I just clicked into the kitchen sink, and this is the kitchen sink for the classic toolkit. The visualizations are also available in the modern toolkit. And you can see here that I have some categories of types of visualizations. I'm just going to pick the first one, the hierarchy association, and I'll pick the first item here, the tree view. So you can see here that I'm showing a list of states, and I'm scrolling my mouse wheel. I can scroll in, scroll out. I can click on one of these, and it highlights and gives me a little bit of an animation. If I double click on it, it gives me further breakouts, further details. So a pretty good example of the types of things you can do with a hierarchical visualization within D3. So the question is, how do you do this? How do you build this interactive visualization in Ext JS? If I go over here to the details, this shows me the code that was used to create this. And we have a tree panel, a traditional tree panel on the left-hand side, which is represented here. And in the center, you'll notice that we have a D3-tree. So that is what it takes to visualize a D3 tree. These other configs that are here are meant to augment the user interface. There's interactions that you can enable or disable. You can specify colors and tooltips. The only other major thing you need to enable this visualization is some sort of a data store. So you can see here that we're binding to a store for this D3 tree. And that store is hierarchical in nature. It has parents that have children that have children. In this case, we have states that have categories of expenditures that have numbers associated with them. I could further break down one of these expenditures into the categories of expenditures. So you get the idea that I'm basically manipulating the UI of a tree, a D3 tree, and I need to specify the component and the data. So that's essentially how you utilize D3 within Ext JS. So there are a lot of examples, a lot of things you can use as reference within the examples, kitchen sink, within the documentation. I pulled one link from the documentation just to give you an idea. So this one is even simpler, and it is part of the documentation. You may have noticed if you use our documentation that we embed JavaScript snippets that you can then run right within the documentation. So this particular example is for a horizontal tree. You'll notice here, here's the store of data, and it's right in line. So you can kind of see that I have a root, and then it has children. Very simple data. So you have to provide a store. This is hard-coded data. Here I'm using a D3 tree, and if I run this, there's my visualization. And I can scroll in, scroll out. It's essentially the same type of visualization that I showed you initially. It's just a little bit simpler, and all the code, including an inline store, is here. So you would just need to take this X type and this store, and you'll see those are really the only two things I need. If I want to do some interactions, panning, zooming, I need to tell the D3 component that, and a little bit on the initial size, but in essence, it's the X type and the store. It's as simple as that. There are various hierarchical components that we built into Ext JS for D3 visualizations. Another one is called a tree map. So a tree map, if I click on this link here and go to the kitchen sink, a tree map is represented by rectangles. Again, the size of the rectangle means something. The color means something. The relative groupings mean something. So you can hear this is home improvement services. If I click on one, I get some highlighting. So a tree map is another category of what you can do. There are various elements of tree maps in here. Here's one that has tooltips. So you can get some of the details of the tree just by hovering over it. If I go over to details here, again, this is just a D3 tree map X type. And here's the store I'm binding to. So the same pattern exists here. You have options to specify tooltips, as you can see here, color, whether you want to be able to expand items, etc. But it's an X type and a store. The other thing that's interesting about tree views, or tree maps, I should say, is that you can combine a tree map with another one of our components called a pivot table. So you can have a dynamic pivot tree map. So you can start looking at different things and start analyzing your data and have the tree map be interactive from utilizing the pivot tables config dialog. That's an interesting side note about the tree map. You can also do circle packing type UI. So this example, again, from the kitchen sink, gives you a set of circles. The colors mean something. I can click, I can highlight. I can see that in this example, this is the D3 pack X type, and I have a store. I don't have many other configs here. I have a little bit of padding and a tooltip. That's it. X type and binding to a store. You can use regular store directly. You don't have to data bind, but these examples show data binding. So all the things you're familiar with Ext JS, being able to do data binding, stores, implementing X types, very simple and straightforward. And now you have some new D3 visualization capabilities. A sunburst is another good example. A sunburst is a component that draws in a circular fashion, allows you to click into the component. You can create sunbursts that are interactive. So if I come back over here to the kitchen sink, here's a sunburst that is zoomable. So you'll notice D3 is at the root, then we have subroots, then we have other roots. If I click in one of these sub areas, you'll notice a nice smooth animation. I'm now in the context of that sub area. I can back out, I can back in, I can go to all sorts of areas, whatever I might need to do. So those were the main categories that we felt were important to make very, very easy. Hierarchical data, nice visualizations, nice animation, all supported by the D3 library. You are able to do more advanced things with D3. The ones we gave you are just an X type and store, but what if you want to do something more complex? What if you find a visualization that you want to implement in Ext JS? How do you do that? We give you two advanced options. You can build visualizations based on the SVG capability, which is a graphics library for HTML, or you can do things based on a custom canvas. And these are all examples that are documented and are in the kitchen sink. So this example right here, which is a heat map of some data, is not one of the components we provide, but you can use the SVG capabilities of D3 and do your own type of interaction with the D3 library. Here it's a little more complicated because I'm using some of the D3 scene generation API, but we wanted to give you that capability in case you wanted to find something more complex, implement it within your application, and still make it an equal citizen in the Ext JS environment. You also can have custom canvases. This is kind of a fun example. This one is drawing, and you can see it's drawing kind of a particle, a list of particles, and as I move my mouse, the mouse will produce the particles. Not necessarily a unique business application, but it gives you an idea of the type of UI and interaction you can have, extreme UI interaction in this case, with building a canvas-based D3.js application or view. So that's there. These are all part of the kitchen sink and are available as D3 advanced, as the D3 advanced component in the enterprise version of Ext JS. I put a few links to further D3.js information with Ext JS. There have been several blogs that have been written. So these first two are blogs on the Sencha website that talk further about using D3.js in Ext JS applications. There's another one here that is also oriented towards what D3 is, and maybe it's easier to read it than watch a video. We have a few YouTube videos. This one's more of a promotional video, but just a little bit more information to get you up to speed on the Ext JS and D3 integration. So that's our sprint for D3 and Ext JS. I want to make a few mentions before we get to the questions and answers. If you're new to Ext JS, you've never tried it, D3 is intriguing to you and you want to see it in action, you can try Ext JS for free. It's available as a 30-day free trial. You get all of the components of Ext JS. You get all of the premium components, which includes D3.js, includes the pivot table. We have a calendar component. We have all sorts of export capabilities. There's a lot to the product. You get all of that, including all of the tooling that we have built with Ext JS. So give it a try. We also are on Twitter, or I guess it's called X now, and YouTube. We have a YouTube channel with updates to things. We have a lot of self-study videos, a lot of things that could get you up and running with either D3 specifically or Ext JS in general. So look for all of that on the Ext JS website, on the Sencha website, sencha.com. We also have a Discord server, which is where we gather for interaction between customers. We have MVPs there, asking questions, answering questions. It's all categorized. There's a D3 section. So I would encourage you, if you haven't already, to join the Discord server. If you need to join, contact your sales rep and they will get you installed and ready to go from the Discord server point of view. So with that, let's go ahead and see if we have any questions from all of you. A reminder again, if you do have a question or a comment, please put it in the Q&A section of the GoToWebinar. With that, I will turn it back and see if there are any questions we can discuss.
Thank you for the presentation, Mark. My name is Raj, Marketing Manager at Sencha. It looks like we have 3 questions that have been submitted. Here's the first one. Most of the time, D3 useful in which sector and domain?
Can you repeat that again? Most of the time, D3 is what?
Useful in which sector and domain? Which industries most likely use the D3 charts or?
I'm not sure I completely understand the question. Maybe sector and domain is, it's not coming to me. So whoever asked that question, if they can maybe expand on the question, I'd be happy to answer it.
Okay, sounds great. All right. Are you capable of using D3.js chart for any sort of data visualization or restricted to Ext JS components?
Well, D3.js is an open source JavaScript library. So you can use it with raw vanilla JavaScript if you want. You can use it with other libraries. It integrates with anything in the browser, JavaScript-wise. The reason we chose to build the D3 integration with Ext JS is we found that building sophisticated D3 visualizations is complex. There's a lot of work, a lot of code, a lot of debugging needed, and we wanted to make entry into the visualization as easy as possible. So while yes, you can use D3 independently, we encourage you to use it with Ext JS and the components we've built. As you saw, there's also custom extensions that we've built to make custom things that maybe we didn't implement a little bit easier. You're still going to have to understand the D3 API, but the answer is yes, you can use this as long as you're building applications for the browser with JavaScript.
Thanks, Mark. The next question we have here, is there any documentation besides the kitchen sink on integrating the pivot table component with D3 or the standard Ext JS charts?
So the question of documentation, there is documentation on all of these components in our documentation, docs.sencha.com. I don't know where here's tree map, sorry about that. And the interaction with the pivot table should be, I don't know off the top of my head where it is, but if it's not here, let me know. I can see if I can find other things, but the combination of the documentation and the interaction in the documentation and the kitchen sink are the two sources to go to.
Great, thanks, Mark. This is a question very specific to Discord. Is there
Sure.
Sencha team is available on Discord channel?
Yeah, the Discord server was built primarily for the community. There are several staff members who come to it, but it's not an official support portal. Obviously, we have a support portal, support.sencha.com for customers. So the Discord server does not replace the official paid for support. It's just there as an additional place where the community and MVPs and at times Sencha staff come. So that you should use it in that regard. Use it as a community interaction server. Still use support. And then also I have my email up here on the last slide. If there's something you can't find on the Discord server, or if there's a question you have that seems to be very specific to your domain, please email me and I'd be happy to interact and see if we can get an answer for you.
Thanks, Mark. We have a next question here. How can I gain access to D3.js?
Yes, D3.js is part of Sencha. Oops, wrong one. There we go. Oh, look at that. Sencha, I've got the Sencha green tea. It's either the Sencha green tea or Sencha.com. So getting access to the Ext JS libraries is part of the enterprise package for Ext JS. So we've got an enterprise package and we've got a pro package. And you'll notice the difference between the two is essentially the premium components. So all of this down here, the premium components in Sencha test. So there's D3 right here. There's the pivot grid, exporter, calendar. So to gain access is to have the enterprise edition. Just to repeat, if you do a trial, and to do a trial is pretty straightforward. You just say getting started, start free trial. The free trial is basically the enterprise edition. So you'll see everything. You'll see D3. You'll be able to use all the tooling, Sencha Test, Themer, Sencha Architect, etc. So that's how you acquire D3 for Ext JS.
Thanks, Mark. It looks like we have answered all the questions asked at this time.
Great, great. Well, I hope this is helpful. We've tried a new sprint series here to try to make these webinars a little more compact, a little more specific to certain areas. This one on D3. We've done previous ones on Sencha Themer, on Architect, on the open tooling or XGen. So those are all recorded as well. So if any of those are helpful to you, please go ahead and find those and take a look at those. Again, if you have any questions at all, get a hold of me. I'd be happy to help. If you want to get on the Discord server, talk to your sales rep. And with that, I will say thank you, and we will look forward to the next webinar.
Thank you, everyone.